In the early morning hours of September 11, 2001, 19 hijackers smuggled box cutters through security at three East Coast airports: Logan International Airport in Boston, Dulles International Airport in Washington, D.C., and Newark International Airport in New Jersey. Then boarded four separate flights bound for California. They had carefully selected flights with coast-to-coast routes so that the planes would be fully loaded with fuel. Soon after takeoff, the hijackers subdued the cabin crew, gained entry to the cockpit, and took control of the planes, effectively transforming these four ordinary passenger jets into expertly guided incendiary missiles. We all know what happened next. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 en route to Los Angeles, carrying 81 passengers and 11 crew members, crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City, exploding into a massive fireball upon impact and leaving a gaping hole between the 93rd and 99th floor of the 110-story building. 30 minutes prior to impact, operators at Logan Air Traffic Control had already begun to suspect the plane had been hijacked. At 9:03 a.m., after making a tight U-turn over New Jersey, United Airlines Flight 175, also a Boeing 767 en route from Logan International to LAX, with 56 passengers and 9 crew members aboard, crashes into the South Tower of the World Trade Center somewhere near the 80th floor. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 en route from Dulles International Airport to Los Angeles with 58 passengers and 6 crew members on board, crashes into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. The flight had made it as far as eastern Kentucky before making a 180-degree turn and heading back to Washington. By this point, millions of people across the globe were glued to their televisions, watching as Flight 77 circled over downtown Washington, D.C. before abruptly losing altitude and crashing into the west side of the Pentagon. The impact created a devastating inferno that killed, along with all the passengers and crew, 125 military personnel and civilians. Just before 10 a.m., approximately 56 minutes after being struck by Flight 175, the South Tower collapses. Minutes later, around 10:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 93, which had been hijacked approximately 40 minutes after taking off from Newark International Airport, flips over and speeds toward the ground at upwards of 500 miles an hour before crashing into a field near Shakesville, Pennsylvania. Due to a delay at takeoff, the passengers on board Flight 93 became aware of the events unfolding in New York and Washington and decided to resist the hijackers. After overpowering 4 of them, a contingent of passengers are believed to have attacked the cockpit with a fire extinguisher, leaving no one left to pilot the aircraft. Then, finally, at 10:28 a.m., around 100 minutes after being struck by Flight 11, the North Tower collapses onto the streets of Lower Manhattan. More than 2,700 people were killed on 9/11, including some 400 emergency services personnel and police. And because the shocking events of that day were globally televised, the horrifying scene left much of the world gripped with fear, horror, and disbelief. In the wake of this unthinkable tragedy, a lot of things changed. First, the administration of President George W. Bush sprang into action, immediately declaring a global war on terrorism, which included the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, and eventually the invasion of Afghanistan. After the 9/11 attacks, it became impossible to deny that America had some serious gaps in its security apparatus, and the conception of the DHS was just one step the government took to improve its ability to prevent and respond to unconventional threats. Taking things a step further, in 2002, President Bush introduced and later signed into law the Homeland Security Act, legislation intended to both streamline and consolidate various government agencies involved in the business of homeland security. Essentially, it would allow 22 different federal entities to operate under the same umbrella. The creation of the DHS represented a major restructuring of the U.S. government's approach to national security, primarily by placing an emphasis on better coordination, information sharing, and a unified approach to tackling potential threats, including terrorism, cybersecurity threats, and natural disasters. Some of the key agencies and entities that were brought together under the DHS include the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, the United States Secret Service, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, and the Science and Technology Directorate, S&T. Another major shift that took place after 9/11 was that Osama bin Laden became a household name, as he became known across the world as the mastermind behind the attacks and the front-facing leader of al-Qaeda, a transnational extremist group he founded in the late 1980s during the Soviet-Afghan War. Leaving bodies strewn across several continents, bin Laden's brutality and determination repeatedly landed him on the radar of both the CIA and FBI. In the decades before 9/11, bin Laden had already cultivated a reputation for being a ruthless and capable terrorist. But the problem of just how to find and capture him had not yet been solved. Once the Twin Towers fell, though, a lot of people, some at the highest levels of government, started to seriously ask, where the heck is bin Laden hiding? Before diving deeper into that question, however, let's quickly take a look at how we got this far. To understand where bin Laden ended up, we need to first understand where he came from. Osama bin Laden was one of over 50 children born to Mohammed bin Laden, a self-made billionaire who initially immigrated to Saudi Arabia from Yemen as a laborer, but would later oversee a number of luxurious construction projects for the Saudi royal family. By the time Mohammed died, ironically in a plane crash in 1967, when Osama was just 10 years old, his company had grown into one of the largest construction firms in the Middle East, and a close relationship had been established between the bin Laden family and the Saudi royal family. Bin Laden, the son, would go on to study business administration at King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah. During this time, he also studied religion under two influential mentors. One was Muhammad Qutb, an Egyptian Islamic scholar and brother of the famed Islamic revivalist Sayyid Qutb. Both brothers were prominent members of the Muslim Brotherhood. Young bin Laden's other religious influence was Abdullah Azzam, a Palestinian Sunni Islamic scholar, theologian, and one of the key figures associated with the early jihadist movement. These years at university are thought to have played a critical role in shaping bin Laden's future as the leader of al-Qaeda, by influencing not only his radical perspectives, but also by giving him the skills he would need to effectively market the organization and its jihadist agenda. And he didn't have to wait long, for when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1979, bin Laden was quick to perceive this as direct aggression against the religion of Islam, and soon became inspired to travel around the country raising funds in the name of an Afghan resistance. And by 1984, he was collaborating with his old mentor, Abdullah Azzam, to recruit resistance fighters from Pakistan. Bin Laden not only had significant financial resources at his disposal, but he'd also built a reputation for himself as a dedicated Muslim and brave combatant, making him the ideal figurehead for what would become the terrorist group al-Qaeda just a few years later. Eventually, the fierce resistance of bin Laden, as well as his followers and collaborators, paid off, and the Soviet withdrew its forces from Afghanistan. At this time, bin Laden was welcomed back into Saudi Arabia with relatively open arms, but not for long. The Saudi government quickly came to see him as a dangerous radical, and a year later, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, they denied bin Laden permission to use his own network as part of the nation's defense. Instead, the Saudi government turned to the US for help, a perceived betrayal that bin Laden could not accept, which prompted him to leave Saudi Arabia for Sudan in 1991. Around the same time, the US sent troops into Iraq and Kuwait, kicking off Operation Desert Storm. Throughout the early 1990s, bin Laden and al-Qaeda fought violently against what they saw as the US's attempt to establish dominance in the Muslim world. Facing pressure from the West, Sudan expelled bin Laden and his followers in 1996, at which time he sought refuge in Afghanistan. Under the Taliban's protection, bin Laden and al-Qaeda continued their holy war against the United States, which included the 1998 bombing of two US embassies, one in Kenya and the other in Tanzania, where a total of 224 people were killed, and the suicide attack on the USS Cole in October of 2000 that left 17 sailors dead and nearly 40 others injured. Under bin Laden's leadership, by the end of the 20th century, al-Qaeda had members in Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Libya, Bosnia, Chechnya, and the Philippines. But that still wasn't enough to satisfy his vision, not even close. Ultimately, bin Laden believed that a devastating attack on American soil would be the only way to convince the US to completely withdraw from the Muslim world. Enter Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the Western-educated Pakistani militant who first suggested the idea for an attack involving trained pilots crashing passenger jets into US buildings during a meeting in Tora Bora, Afghanistan, with bin Laden back in 1996. A senior al-Qaeda member at the time, Mohammed would later be described as the principal architect of the 9/11 attacks, due to his significant involvement in the planning and coordination of the operation. The undeniable success of 9/11 showed the world that al-Qaeda was not only far-reaching, but well-organized. The plot included planning meetings in Malaysia, operatives taking flight lessons in the US, coordination from leaders living in Hamburg, Germany, money transfers from Dubai, and recruitment from countries across the Middle East, along with various other activities that were all ultimately overseen by the al-Qaeda leadership hiding out in Afghanistan. Another, perhaps unintended consequence of 9/11 was that it painted a much bigger target on bin Laden's back, and within a month of the attacks, the full might of the US intelligence service was aimed at either capturing or killing him. The CIA already knew that the Taliban, which had seized power of Afghanistan in 1996 following Soviet Union occupation, was harboring bin Laden. They just didn't know exactly where. So, on October 7th of 2001, a coalition of US and British forces officially kicked off Operation Enduring Freedom, with a 5-day aerial bombing campaign against several known al-Qaeda and Taliban targets located in Kandahar, Kabul, and Jalalabad. A contingent made up of more than 300 US Special Forces soldiers and 110 officers from the CIA soon followed. Working alongside the Northern Alliance, a military and political resistance force determined to break the Taliban's grip on the country, the US-led coalition quickly captured a number of Taliban strongholds, including the capital city of Kabul. Soon after that, coalition forces also took Kandahar, which signaled the official end of Taliban rule in Afghanistan. This left the Taliban, al-Qaeda, and bin Laden with no choice but to flee. Despite the coalition's swift suppression of the Taliban, however, American troops would remain in Afghanistan for the next 2 decades, before a poorly orchestrated withdrawal was finally executed in August of 2021. At which time, unfortunately, the Taliban swiftly regained control. Facing heavy scrutiny over the calamitous withdrawal and the Taliban's prompt return to power, President Joe Biden stated, "I was the 4th president to preside over an American troop presence in Afghanistan. 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and I would not, and will not, pass this war on to a 5th." In the wake of the withdrawal, it's been speculated by many that the war in Afghanistan would have been significantly shorter had bin Laden been captured or killed. But it's impossible to say for sure what would have happened if coalition forces hadn't missed him in Tora Bora back in 2001. Located in the Pachir-Wa Agam district in the Nangarhar province of eastern Afghanistan, Tora Bora is where the hunt for bin Laden really started. Essentially a complex of caves and tunnels carved into the mountainous terrain, Tora Bora is approximately 31 miles or 50 kilometers west of the Khyber Pass, 30 miles or 48 kilometers southeast of Jalalabad, and 6 miles or 10 kilometers north of the border of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in Pakistan. Tora Bora is accessible, to a point, only by a series of unpaved roads that end several miles shy of the cave complex. From there, the only option is to travel the rest of the way on foot. It's thought to be some of the most forbidding terrain on Earth. It's also important to note here that Tora Bora is not a single location, but rather a fortress-like section of the White Mountains spanning a little over 56 square miles, or 90 square kilometers. It's characterized by narrow valleys, snow-covered ridgelines, and jagged peaks, some reaching heights of nearly 14,000 feet or 4,300 meters. During the 1980s, while battling the Soviets in Afghanistan, bin Laden transformed much of Tora Bora into a formidable stronghold. He constructed a rudimentary road from Jalalabad and used heavy equipment to fortify existing caves as well as excavate new ones. He also oversaw the construction of a series of connecting tunnels which would allow fighters to move discreetly between locations during engagements with Soviet ground troops. When coalition forces and their local allies began their assault on Tora Bora in December of 2001, bin Laden and several hundred of his men, the largest known concentration of al-Qaeda fighters at the time, took shelter in Tora Bora's bunkers as they endured relentless pounding by American aircraft, as many as 100 airstrikes a day. And just to show they meant business, one U.S. Special Forces element called for the drop of a 15,000-pound bomb known as a daisy cutter, which hadn't been used in combat since Vietnam, a bomb so massive it had to be rolled out of the back of a C-130 cargo plane. Unfortunately, American commandos in the immediate area numbered fewer than 100, and when they and their Afghan allies requested reinforcements for a ground assault on the cave complex, they were denied. Requests to deploy U.S. troops to block potential escape routes through the mountains to Pakistan were also rejected. And in the end, American military forces, including sniper teams and highly mobile Marine Corps and Army divisions, were kept on the sidelines, leaving the task of taking out bin Laden to a lucky airstrike, untrained Afghan militia, or Pakistan's loosely organized frontier corps. And when the dust settled sometime on or around December 16th, the fears of many military leaders on the ground were realized, and bin Laden and an entourage of bodyguards ended up walking out of Tora Bora and disappearing over the border into Pakistan's unregulated tribal area. No one was happy about bin Laden's escape, but many acknowledged that the odds had been against them from the beginning. Back in 2001, even though special operations forces were well established across the globe, they were a relatively untapped resource. This sort of unconventional operation, like what eventually went down at Tora Bora, was largely unproven beforehand. And due to the secretive nature of most special ops units, many of the high-ranking government officials and regular military officers who had the power to employ them if needed didn't even know they existed or were unfamiliar with their capabilities. Another challenging aspect of the Tora Bora mission was the complex configuration of Afghani warlords. Despite many of the militia groups being anti-Taliban, the CIA operatives working with them couldn't guarantee their support without handing over duffel bags full of American cash, and hardly even then. The CIA knew their only options were to buy them, bribe them, or fight them, which made the coalition's choice of allies questionable at best. Some warlords turned out to be longtime enemies and demanded to be paid extra simply to work together, while others had fought alongside bin Laden during the Soviet invasion. This certainly brought their allegiance into question, but at least they knew the terrain. When Special Ops Forces and the CIA finally left Tora Bora, they sincerely hoped someone would find bin Laden's body buried under one of the caves, but as we know, that didn't happen. So where did bin Laden go? According to U.S. intelligence reports, after escaping Tora Bora sometime around mid-December, bin Laden and a contingent of bodyguards traveled on foot and horseback across the mountain passes into Pakistan, helped on their way by Afghans and Pakistanis who had been paid in advance. After that, things got a little confusing. Less than 2 weeks later, on December 25th of 2001, the Pakistan Observer published details of bin Laden's funeral on the front page of its newspaper. The story claimed that an unnamed Taliban leader confirmed bin Laden had died of natural causes back in Tora Bora. But then, just 2 days later, the Arab television news outlet Al Jazeera aired a 30-minute video of a tired-looking but very much alive bin Laden wearing military fatigues. As proof it was him, he verbally timestamps the video, claiming that it was recorded 3 months after the blessed attack against the United States and 2 months after the beginning of the West's vicious aggression against Islam. He did not say, however, where he was when he made the recording. In the following years, U.S. military forces searched for him along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, but the exact details of his whereabouts remained unclear. It's widely believed he sought refuge in the mountainous region between Afghanistan and Pakistan, often moving between different locations, likely with the help of local al-Qaeda sympathizers. As well as other locations, the bin Laden family were believed to have spent time in both the frontier city of Peshawar and the rural Swat Valley. Peshawar, the capital of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province in northern Pakistan, with a population of nearly 2 million people, sits just west of the Bara River, a tributary of the Kabul River near the Khyber Pass. Once a significant historic center for caravan travel and trade between both Afghanistan and other countries in Central Asia, Peshawar is today connected by highway and rail with Lahore, Rawalpindi, Hyderabad, and Karachi, and by air with Rawalpindi, Chitral, and Kabul, Afghanistan. And although Taliban activity in this area increased steadily during the early 2000s, it didn't become a major problem until 2009, just 2 years before bin Laden was killed. Then there's the Swat Valley, also known as the Switzerland of Pakistan, a district in the Malakand division of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province surrounding the Swat River. With an average elevation of 3,220 feet or 980 meters, a total area of 2,061 square miles or 5,337 square kilometers, and a population of around 2.3 million. This would have been an excellent place for bin Laden to hide out, given the region is completely surrounded by the Hindu Kush Mountains and contains a number of less populated sub-valleys such as Kalam, Bahrain, Matiltan, Utror, and Gabral. It's also been rumored that bin Laden and his family lived for nearly 2.5 years in the village of Chak Shah Muhammad in the nearby Haripur district, also in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. What's most likely is that bin Laden changed locations regularly, moving between sympathetic groups or locations in northern Pakistan, before permanently settling in Abbottabad sometime in late 2005 or 2006, perhaps weary from years on the run. Due to a lengthy and intense information-gathering campaign by the CIA and other intelligence agencies, we know that sometime in 2004, bin Laden arranged for the purchase of a handful of small, adjoining lots just northeast of Abbottabad's city center. The property was allegedly purchased by bin Laden's courier, Abu Ahmad al-Qaeda, and was located at the end of a dirt road 1,420 yards or 1,300 meters southwest of the Pakistan Military Academy in Bilal town. Together, the lots covered an area of about 3,800 square yards, or 3,500 square meters, and cost somewhere around $48,000, or approximately 13,776,000 Pakistani rupees. Immediately after acquiring the property, al-Qaeda hired a local architectural firm to draw up plans for a large, two-story building with very specific criteria. The ground floor would need to include 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a kitchen, and the second floor would need to have another 4 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. After production was nearly complete, however, al-Qaeda had the builder add on a 3rd floor that was not included on the approved set of plans. The additional floor included a bedroom, a study, a bathroom, and a kitchen, as well as a layer of privacy film covering all the upper floor windows, of which there were few. This would become bin Laden's secret living area. Other privacy and security features of the compound included 6.5-foot or 2-meter high walls around the main building and a thick 18-foot or 5.5-meter high wall topped with razor wire wrapping around the entire compound. These added security features were puzzling to the builder, both because the Bilal town neighborhood was typically safe and peaceful, and because the outer wall was significantly higher than the architect's plans had called for. But al-Qaeda quickly made it clear that it would be in his best interest not to ask questions. By the end of 2005, bin Laden and at least 3 of his wives and several younger children had arrived and been installed on the grounds, which would also contain a well-kept vegetable garden, rabbits, nearly 100 chickens, and a cow. Over the next several years, the older bin Laden children, as well as their spouses and children, would also come and go from the property. And it would be here, at this heavily fortified compound in Abbottabad, that bin Laden came to share with several wives and children and a handful of supporters, where he would hide out for the last 5 years of his life. Unfortunately for bin Laden, it would be his decision to hide in plain sight that allowed the CIA to finally catch up with him. Despite all the meticulous precautions that were taken to conceal the identities of those living in the compound, especially bin Laden, it would be al-Qaeda, bin Laden's most trusted courier, who would lead U.S. intelligence officials to the infamous terrorist leader's location. The trail started with information collected from Guantanamo Bay detainees, information that allowed intelligence officers to determine al-Qaeda's current pseudonym and that he was also a protege of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Using this information, in 2007 the CIA was able to uncover al-Qaeda's real name, and 2 years and a lot of digging later, that he lived in Abbottabad, a city situated in the Orash Valley in the Hazara region of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, about 35 miles or 56 kilometers north of Islamabad. This discovery narrowed their search area significantly, and by late 2010, using satellite imagery and intelligence reports, the CIA was able to link al-Qaeda to the compound and begin surveilling its inhabitants. Counterintelligence experts soon concluded that the compound was indeed custom-built for the purpose of hiding the identity of someone of great significance. But despite their efforts, they couldn't know for sure it was bin Laden until they got inside. Because there were clearly women and children living on the premises, even though it was discussed, simply bombing the whole compound to dust wasn't an option, or at least not the most diplomatic option. But this was by far the closest they'd come to pinpointing bin Laden's location in a decade, and they weren't about to make the same mistake they had in Tora Bora. So, in April 2011, President Barack Obama authorized members of SEAL Team 6 to carry out a raid on the compound. And on May 1st at 22:25 in Abbottabad, President Obama, along with other top officials, formally approved the execution of Operation Neptune Spear. Less than 30 minutes later, at 22:51 local time, 2 stealth Black Hawk helicopters carrying 23 Navy SEALs, an interpreter, and a bomb-sniffing combat dog take off under the cover of darkness from Jalalabad airfield in eastern Afghanistan. An hour and 39 minutes later, at 01:30, the 2 Black Hawks arrive over the compound in central Abbottabad, but upon landing, the tail rotor of one helicopter hits the outer wall and it crash lands in the animal pen. No one is injured and the mission continues uninterrupted. At 01:33, the SEALs use portable explosives to breach the compound entrance, moving quickly inside. As the SEALs move through the house, they detain non-hostile individuals with zip ties, while engaging and killing anyone hostile, including one of bin Laden's sons. At 01:39, just 9 minutes after arriving at the target, the team locates bin Laden on the 3rd floor of the compound and quickly fire off multiple rounds, killing bin Laden. At 01:55, several members of SEAL Team 6 move bin Laden's body to the 1st floor of the compound, place it in a body bag, and get ready for extraction. After gathering as much intelligence as they could from the compound, at 02:05, the first helicopter lifts off, headed back to Jalalabad. At 02:08, the remaining team members destroy the downed Black Hawk using an incendiary grenade and are immediately extracted by a backup helicopter. From start to finish, the entire operation that killed the world's most wanted terrorist lasted only 40 minutes. But it was also the culmination of years of intelligence gathering, calculated planning, and elite training. Later that day, DNA testing confirmed that the man killed on the 3rd floor was indeed Osama bin Laden. The body was then flown more than 620 miles or 1,000 kilometers out to a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson, where it was placed in a simple white sheet and lowered into the North Arabian Sea. Although a burial at sea typically deviates from the way most Muslim burials occur, U.S. officials insisted they did what they could to bury bin Laden in accordance with traditional Islamic funeral practices. The decision, they said, was based on several political, religious, and logistical factors. For one, there was genuine concern that if he was buried on land, his grave might become a shrine or pilgrimage site that might further inspire his followers. To observe Islamic tradition, he also needed to be buried within 24 hours after his death. The impromptu funeral service for bin Laden took place aboard a Navy carrier with thousands of crew members, but only a small number of them were present. In fact, less than a dozen officers and senior enlisted members aboard the USS Carl Vinson even knew the burial was taking place. After bin Laden's death was announced, U.S. government officials also had to decide whether or not to release photos of the body, which they claimed to have. Making the photos public would likely counter conspiracy theories that bin Laden was still alive, but President Obama ultimately decided against it. He did not want the graphic photos to be mistaken for trophies or provoke bin Laden's supporters. In the end, the assassination of Osama bin Laden was considered a major victory in the ongoing global effort to combat terrorism, and marked a significant moment for the U.S. government as well as the American people. The U.S. government's ability to locate and neutralize the infamous leader of al-Qaeda was seen as a critical step toward the future of international counterterrorism operations and was met with widespread support and relief in the United States. The death of bin Laden also held a particular significance for the families of those who died on 9/11, who might in some way feel that justice had finally been done. Now watch the real reason why the US didn't nuke Tokyo, or how Israel was formed.